Hello everyone, I'm Seth with Hornady Manufacturing. Joining me today, Marketing Director Neil Davies and Jaden Quinlan and Joe Thielen from our engineering staff. Now we're looking at a 2022 new product, and that's the CX Bullet. Guys, thanks for joining me, and let's talk about the CX.
Yeah, I mean, this is the copper alloy expanding bullet. That's what CX stands for. And, you know, it's a fantastic new monolithic option that Joe and Jaden have tested and developed, and, you know, the rest of the crew in our engineering departments put a lot of work into making what we firmly believe is the best monolithic, solid, expanding hunting bullet on the market.
And monolithic bullets, really popular for hunting and becoming more popular because of their lead-free, and two, the terminal performance is just fantastic. So, Joe, Jaden, talk to us a little bit about how the CX came to be. How did we design this bullet, and what were we designing it for?
Well, we kind of took a look at legacy monolithic hunting bullets to start, right? This isn't something new. I mean, you've had monolithic hunting bullets available for quite some time. So we took a look at those and kind of where their performance was, where the limitation envelopes were, you know, how far could you take something and still make it work? And ultimately, that's what the CX became. There's some really critical parts to it that make it perform the way it does. But its roots come from looking at what existed and how do we make it much better.
Okay. What tools did you use to look at how you make a bullet better? Obviously, from the outside, you can't really see anything different unless maybe you know what you're looking for. Was it Doppler radar, or was it a terminal performance, or how did you isolate how we could make this better?
All of the above. The Doppler radar played a huge role in this bullet, and then on the terminal side, you guys took a really hard look into that.
Well, we all know that monolithic hunting bullets, they have a need for speed. I mean, they're a tough, bullet that delivers excellent penetration and expansion, all that. But to get that performance, you need speed. So you're like, okay, you boil it all down to that. How do we get more speed or impact velocity on the target?
Downrange.
Downrange, exactly. Yes, you can put them in a Magnum and this and that, but let's focus on the bullet. So you take a look at the bullet, you need to reduce the drag in order to carry that velocity further downrange. So that's where, if you look at the grooves, if you look carefully, the grooves are a different shape, and that reduces the drag of the projectile. Well, when you reduce the drag, we come back and be like, okay, do we need to put a heat shield tip in this? Check. Yes, it was applicable for those things at this point. So then you look at what else can you do on the shape of the bullet side? Well, some of the bullets are constrained by the cartridge and chamber that they fit in. But the new cartridges that we have, 6 Creed, 6.5 Creed, 6.5, and 300 PRC, we can put a longer bullet in there now, and you have just a better hunting package with those options.
Right. Those cartridges you mentioned got traditionally fast for caliber twist rates. So we were able to make some really cool designs on our 30 cal 190, our 6.5 130, and the 6mm 90. Really stretch those ogive profiles out. And then with the performance benefits that you guys talked about, they'll hang on to that velocity longer downrange and still deliver that terminal performance that monolithic bullets are really known for.
Yeah, and I mean the BC has been maximized, quite frankly, as far as any monolithic bullets could be crafted. Correct. So some of that's in that groove geometry, some of it's in the actual design of the projectile, and then the heat shield tip just lends itself well to maintaining that downrange high velocity that you need in order for that bullet to become now an extended range monolithic hunting projectile, which in the past was very difficult to achieve. So you're effectively getting how much more distance would you say, when you're hunting with the mean cartridge, the mean bullet in this regard?
You're probably going to gain to 100 yards, generally speaking. I mean, there's some applications and cartridges where you're going to gain more than that, and some maybe a little bit less. But that's a huge difference, right? I mean, if you have if you have the capability as a shooter to place that bullet exactly where you want at 500 instead of 400, but you're now limited by the old school bullet construction.
Yeah,
you can only shoot out to 400, even though you can put the bullet in the right spot. It's not going to have enough juice left to do the job.
Yeah,
and those limitations are gone now with the CX.
And the traditional magic number, if you will, for monolithic bullets is about 2,000 feet per second of impact speed to get that terminal performance that we're looking for. And like you said, if you can extend that 50, 100 yards, maybe even a little further, sometimes you don't get any closer. And if you can't take the shot because the velocity isn't there to expand the bullet, that's a difference between punching a tag and not.
Sure.
I
And-
suppose, and presumably at higher altitudes, you might even get further performance than that
I was
because you
gonna
get
say that, yeah.
thinner air to deal with.
Well, and let's face it, up close too, take that 150-yard shot. Now you have a bullet that just works, 10% better
Yeah.
than it did before because you have
Mhm.
more energy on target. The monolithic bullet's tough. You're going to beautiful mushroom, 36
Right.
inches of penetration.
And we've been talking about the extended opportunities with the new CX bullet, but the other side of that coin is monolithic bullet performance at point blank, sub 100 yards right up to the muzzle. Nothing is going to give you the penetration through hide bone at high impact speeds. And the other option is not perfect shot angles. If you get that shot angle where it's slightly quartering towards or away from you, and that's the only shot opportunity you get, you have to put it there. This thing's going to drive, like you mentioned, sometimes up to 36 inches of penetration. That is remarkable.
I mean, we'd be remiss not to discuss the pedigree of the CX bullet. It's an adaptation and way further advancement of our prior technology with the GMX bullet. And I mean, I've had quite a bit of experience with the GMX over the years. I think we brought it out in about 2009, I believe. And since then, I've had the good fortune to use it on a lot of different hunts around the world, quite frankly. And, I have a couple of recovered bullets here. Now, these are not CXs, these are GMXs. This performance is not quite what this bullet's ever going to do, because this bullet is just a vast improvement upon, this old technology here. But terminally, this is what your projectiles are going to look like. You're going to get that deep penetration, 35, 36 plus inches of penetration. So, if you're hunting overseas, a lot of times in Africa, the PH, the professional hunter, your guide is going to tell you to take a shot that might be, not the most optimum angle. Well, you can fish this shot in from the, behind the rib cage and drive all the way forward into the vitals, because you're going to have this 95+% weight retention from these monolithic projectiles that's going to drive in there, penetrate bone. You're going to have that high weight retention. It's just going to be a devastating effects on game.
So the new CX bullet, it's a premier bullet from Hornady. And we've also got our traditional lead core bullets. And we've got some premier bullets in the lead core world like the ELDX. So let's talk about who's going to opt for this CX bullet, this monolithic CX, over a traditional lead core bullet. There's a lot of different shot opportunities and angles and places you're going to hunt. So who do you think is really going to target this new CX?
Well, I mean, first it goes to, unfortunately, there's restrictions in certain locations on people that can't use lead core or lead bullets, which is, obviously unfortunate. And there's a lot behind that. I won't get into that in this video, but in California and other places like that, it's pretty much mandated that you use a projectile like this. Now, on the flip side, everybody can benefit from this projectile. If you are shooting a hypervelocity cartridge, if you're a hand loader, wildcatter, and you've got something that just, is smoking, you need to shoot a bullet like the CX. It's going to be the choice for you. It's highly accurate. It has high weight retention and has deep penetration. This bullet is viable on all North American game, quite frankly. Really at home on medium and large size games. So deer, elk, moose, anything like that. It's a phenomenal option for those folks.
Awesome. And from an extended range standpoint, where does this fit as you guys see it? What kind of hunter is looking for this?
Well, I think one of the things you have to address is people's preference in terminal performance. There's the age-old argument of I want to find the bullet just under the skin on the offside where it's deposited its in complete energy into the animal and then stopped right there. And there's some people that want 2 holes. They want air coming in through 2 holes and blood coming out 2 holes for tracking. I don't think either one of them is right or wrong. I think it's the preference on what you want to do. Well, if you're one of those hunters that wants to have deeper penetration and possibly that exit, so it's easier to track and possibly faster to get air into the chest cavity, this is going to be the bullet for that. I mean, most of the lead core traditional hunting bullets, ELDX included, you're going to find those a lot of times right under the hide on the offside. I mean, those bullets are designed to dump their energy strategically and use it all up within the animal. So sometimes you can get one that will exit, but it's going to be a lot less likely than with the CX.
Yeah, I would definitely echo what Jaden said there. I mean, on a broadside shot on, the majority of white-tailed deer in the United States, you should expect to pass through we'd be remiss to guarantee that every time, but that would be something that you should expect to see. So, and then huge one is on feral pigs or hogs. I mean, that's a phenomenal option for pigs, because pigs are tough animals, and sometimes they, if you don't get a good pass through, you don't get a good blood trail. They have such thick hide and fat on their hide and things that it'll close up on those opens and exits when you impact them. So having 2 holes in a pig is definitely beneficial in order to help you find them. Yeah. But yeah, it's a great choice. It'll work in a variety of situations. But like Jaden said, I mean, you will get penetration and most likely a pass through on the majority of animals you're shooting.
You'd mentioned earlier, it's really viable for anything, from antelope to brown bear, moose, etc. One thing we hadn't spoke about yet, but I find this hugely valuable with monolithic bullets, and now the CX specifically, is on a destination type hunt. A lot of times, you get to Alaska, Canada, Africa, someplace like that. You've got money invested in travel and the tag and the guide fee and this, that, and the other thing. And there's a lot invested in just getting there. And a monolithic bullet like the CX, it just gives you that little bit of insurance that no matter the shot angle, no matter how tough the animal is, you are going to be able to put that thing into the vitals. If it's a quartering away shot, like you'd mentioned, you can fish it right through the ribs and get into the vitals, and you know that bullet's going to perform. So when you've got more on the line than a resident deer tag, this is a little bit of an insurance policy that I think is worthwhile, is just choosing the CX bullet because of its penetration. When you're going across the pond or making a big trip somewhere, this is a no-fail option.
I always like it when people ask me, you're out and about, hey, what do you use for this situation? Or you'll be hunting in a guy group, why are you using that? And the age-old analogy that I love to use on the CX or the monolithic hunting bullets is this bullet allows me as an imperfect hunter or shooter, gives me an insurance policy, freedom to not make the perfect shot, because the bullet's going to make up for my misplacement, wind, whatever it is on an animal. And the terminal performance is so devastating that you're going to harvest that animal. So
that's a good way to put it. All right, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the terminal performance differences between like a monolithic bullet like our CX and a traditional lead core bullet. Maybe compare our ELDX, let's say, which is our premier lead core hunting bullet, and our new CX bullet.
They both, from a terminal perspective, they start out in the way they work the same way. So once that bullet impacts terminal media, that tip is going to drive back into the bullet and initiate expansion. So they both start expanding in the same manner. Now, after that, there's some differences. With the monolithic, with the CX, it's a much harder material. That copper alloy material is hard. And so what happens is that expansion happens a little bit slower, but within a couple inches, you're getting immediate expansion because the tip is driven back in. Now, with the lead core bullet, the lead is softer, so you get generally a more rapid expansion that occurs. And that's why you see the CX penetrating deeper than you do a lead core bullet of the same weight and design, is because of the expansion of that is slightly slower in rate compared to the lead core bullet, which happens more rapidly. But other than that, the wound channel characteristics are very, very similar. And you're going to get that difference in penetration that we kind of alluded to earlier. You're going to get deeper penetration with the CX than you would a comparable lead core bullet.
And isn't shedding any, not very many shards, or it's not losing much weight. When
weight retention is extremely high. So one of the other differences is the impact velocity requirements of the CX or the monolithic style versus a cup and core or lead core bullet. So being that lead core is softer, it allows the bullet to expand at a lower velocity. So a 2,000 foot per second is a pretty good bottom end that the CX is going to still expand to. Where if you compare that to some of the lead core designs, you're going to get expansion down at 1,800 feet per second and even down to 1,600 feet per second with the ELDX. But the thing to keep in mind is that with the increased aerodynamic performance of the CX, this bullet is going to outperform any other monolithic bullet on the market.
So terminal performance aside, let's take a look at bullet design and maybe some bullet design attributes between lead core and monolithic, because the CX and a lead core bullet, they're vastly different in how they work and their shape and their length. And I know you guys can talk about that.
Sure. So the most obvious difference, if you hold two of them up side by side, is the grooves that you see on the CX. So those grooves are there for a couple purposes. One is because that monolithic material when it's engraving into the rifling and traveling down the bore, those grooves actually relieve a little bit of pressure. They give the material that's displaced by the rifling a place to go. Another aspect is they allow you to crimp the case mouth in there to hold the projectile within the case a little bit more positively. So you'll see with the CX that the groove geometry is different than you've seen on traditional bullets. And that's one of the things we did when we took a look at what can we do to improve the performance. We said, well, why is this old traditional groove geometry being used? And there was no good answer for it. What happens? Can we improve that? And ultimately we did with the radar. We found out that this geometry actually lowered the drag.
It just helps that airflow around that projectile, basically, right?
Right. So we're able to maintain that root performance of the grooves themselves, the reduction of pressure and the ability to crimp in, but we did it in a way where we weren't compromising the drag like a traditional monolithic bullet will have. So you've reduced the drag with those grooves.
Okay.
And then once we did that, we found out that reduced the drag enough that these bullets were now applicable for the heat shield tip. So that same tip that you've seen in ELD Match and ELDX that gives it that fantastic aerodynamic performance, the really high BC, the great retained velocity.
And consistent BC, that's the big one.
Absolutely. That's now applicable for the CX, and that's why you'll see it having a heat shield tip.
Okay. And now we've got those new offerings, like I mentioned, the 30 cal 190, the 6.5 130, and the 6mm 90 grain. And these, if you just look at the outside shape, they look reminiscent of maybe one of our match bullets. So can you talk a little bit, Joe, about the design attributes that you have to keep in mind when you're using a copper alloy material versus a lead core bullet, and twist rate and spin and all that?
Yeah, that's a good thing to touch on, Seth. So with a monolithic projectile, we don't have any lead in it. That's what we've talked about. So you're a homogeneous metal material. The copper's not as heavy as lead. So your CG and your CP are in different locations versus a cup and core bullet. These CXs are longer per weight.
Okay.
So the same length of bullet with a lead core in it is
you
obviously
just don't
going
have
to
the
be,
density.
We don't have the density.
Yeah.
So these bullets, you have to really take into account twist rate of the rifle, the barrels that they're fired out of, to shoot the longer monolithic projectiles. That's where the 6 Creed, 6.5 Creed, 6.5 PRC, 300 PR, all the ones that we've introduced lately that got a faster twist than the conventional, say a 10 and a 30 cal. Mm-hmm. So you can make and design longer, heavier monolithic bullets and get added drag benefits, added terminal performance, all the things we've discussed. You build a better bullet, essentially.
So with this new advancement in monolithic bullet technology, we're able to take all of our existing and legacy monolithic bullets and replace them with the new CX. So you're going to have an option from 6mm all the way up to 375 as a component bullet. Now, where can we find this in factory loaded ammo?
Well, the big one obviously is outfitter ammo. So this is a line of ammunition that we developed that is, extremely rugged. You've got nickel-plated cartridge cases, sealed case mouths, sealed primers, and then of course you'd want to use the most rugged bullet in our line, which is the CX bullet. So for those adventure hunts, this is really an ideal option. You're going overseas, you're going elk hunting, you're going moose hunting, etc. This is ammo that will provide that performance regardless of atmospheric conditions. You drop your ammo in the snow, you don't have water intrusion into your cartridge case, degrading your powder, drops in a creek, you're crossing a creek. Now, that all being said, it's also extremely applicable for hunting deer in your back 40. And another consideration for folks is that with seal case comes the advantage of avoiding any moisture intrusion. So that'd be if you're storing it in a basement, you're storing it somewhere like that, it'll help that cartridge, lifespan. And then the other one is the other legacy product that we've had for a long time. It's been a fun line is the Super Performance ammunition line. So that is a line that is providing you with 100 to 200 feet per second more muzzle velocity than conventional ammunition out of your gun. It's been a fantastic product. I think it was introduced right about the same time as the GMX had been years ago, but it's done through progressive propellant technology that burns out. That propellant burns in a shorter period of time, thus shorter barrels, or just really at home with shooting Super Performance ammunition.
So the new CX bullet from 6mm all the way up to 375, we've got the factory ammunition. They're also going to be available as components for the hand loader. So we'll update that in our reloading app. The majority of these bullets can use a traditional seating stem in your seating die. Now our new offerings in 30 cal with the 190, the 6.5 130, and the 6mm 90 grain, really long, a lot of slipstream in that design. You're going to want to use an ELDX stem for that particular shape. Now, with all these technological advancements in the shape of the bullet, that allows us to put them in our Ford-off calculator. Jaden, why are these applicable to use in Ford-off?
Right. So being that we were able to use the heat shield tip in these projectiles and there's no change in shape of the tip or deformation due to aerodynamic heating that traditional polymer tip bullets may have, they're now applicable for use in the Ford-off. So what that means for the user is traditionally the ELDX has been the only hunting bullet that's in Ford-off with the heat shield tip in it. Now you're going to have two offerings. You're going to have the entire ELDX lineup as well as the CX lineup to give you, what is the most accurate trajectory predictions available on the market today with these new monolithic bullets.
And with the addition of the heat shield tip, the advancements that have been accomplished with the geometry of the bullet, these are now an extended range hunting monolithic bullet.
So there's a lot of other monolithic bullets on the market. What sets the CX bullet apart?
Well, the first part is the material. So the CX uses a copper alloy material. Most of the other monolithic bullets on the market use a pure copper material. And you're going to see a huge difference in the level of fouling between the two in your barrel. So that copper material is softer, it's gummier. You're going to see it fouls up a barrel a lot worse than the CX does. That copper alloy material prevents that fouling, which means you're going to have more consistency over shot to shot to shot through the life of your use of that style of projectile. When you use the pure copper projectiles, you're going to have to clean more often. You're going to have changes in your velocity migration over the barrel's life. The more you shoot, the more it changes. This is just a much better method to deal with that problem that a monolithic bullet traditionally has. In addition to that, every one of these bullets is going to be ran through the radar and added into the Ford-off program. So you have the exact profile of how that projectile travels through the air available to you. You don't have that with other traditional monolithic bullets. You're provided with a BC number. It's arguable how accurate it is depending on your application. You don't have to worry about that with the CX anymore. It's all been put over the radar. It is what it is then.
Awesome. So you get a bullet that's going to foul your barrel less. It's a little bit more lubrous than pure copper. And then you get the added benefit of Doppler verified drag characteristics. It's kind of an all-inclusive premier type bullet. So this company was founded on accuracy and hunting. And there are a ton of us here, almost all the employees here are shooters and are hunters. And that's really manifested itself in our cartridge design over the last few years. Like you'd mentioned, Joe, the 300 PRC, the 6.5 PRC, the Creedmoors. We're really pushing the envelope in cartridge design. We're all hunters. And Neil, you've used this bullet all over the world. You guys have also used traditional monolithic bullets. And now, because of our technological advancements and the way that we're using our Doppler radar, we are truly building the bullet we want to use. We are building the best monolithic bullet that we as hunters want to use. And I think that is just really, it's just fantastic for the market, for the industry, and for us as hunters as well.
From a technical standpoint, that is one of the beauties of working here is we get to go use the product in the real world environment. And then you're like, okay, what's the weak point here? We go back there and we talk to our peers and coworkers and we fix those weak points on a product or a cartridge or whatever it may be. And then we develop a better mousetrap. It's fun. That to me is rewarding. It's very fun.
We're like you started. We're just hunters. We're no different than any other hunter in this world. And the difference is that we have instruments and tools.
Yeah.
And so if you pick any hunter out of anywhere in the world and say, okay, here's a bullet press and here's a radar and here's all these different tools you can use, build the bullet you want. That's what we've done here. I mean, at its core, we're no different than anybody else, but we get to do this, and that's really cool.
That's a good way to put it.
And the new CX bullet basically, is the pinnacle of monolithic, controlled expansion hunting bullet design with advanced aerodynamic capabilities.
All right, guys, thanks for taking the time to sit down with me and talk about the new CX bullet. Obviously, we're excited about it. I can't wait to use it this fall. For more information on the CX bullet and all of our other new products, check out our social media platforms. And as always, Hornady.com.